Hello and welcome to the Soul Shaking Love podcast. I'm Valerie Green from CoachValerieGreen.com, and this podcast is dedicated to bringing you the world's expert teachers and how to build a mind, body, and spirit connection, both with yourself and with your true love. And today, this is one of my favorite topics. I am really excited to talk about how to build conscious relationships, which is just a wonderful topic for the new year with conscious relationship coach LaShawn McQuarrie. Hello, LaShawn.
Hello, Valerie. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. I think this is, obviously this episode will be live, forever, but we're launching it right before the new year in 2026. And I think that it is just such a wonderful opportunity for everybody whose intention is to build a conscious partnership going forward to really explore what that means. Because I know that a lot of my clients come to me because they're stuck in situationships, as they call them. Um, right. And I mean, I'm imagining that you've heard that term and you probably,
Absolutely.
speak
Yes.
to a lot of people in that camp.
Yes, absolutely. And it's about knowing what situation you want to be in and starting from that space so that you can clear up your situationships. So as I like to say, so yeah, it's always this internal dialogue that we're having with ourselves. So I'm really excited about today's show.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll introduce the topic a little more because it's really the keys from this episode are how self-honesty and self-knowledge, emotional responsibility, and spiritual maturity, which is what we'll talk about. They transform the way that we can connect and explore what's possible in relationships so that they can become a place for growth and real partnership. And we'll really explore what that means. And LaShawn has written a couple wonderful books, which she'll talk about at the end. It's I Am Not an Option, A Woman's Guide to Self-Love and Relationships. And before we go any further, the pre-engagement workbook for couples. So she's a real expert in these topics to actually connect most deeply with your life trajectory, your values, your vision, your needs, right? And make sure that you're truly aligned with the person that you're with, not just compatible. So I think that this is going to be a wonderful, wonderful exploration. And so, first of all, LaShawn, I just want to ask you, why is it important to create a conscious relationship with yourself? We'll start there. Because, as we know, the outer reflects the inner, but, why is that so? Before you can really create a conscious relationship with another person.
Well, when I talk about conscious relationships, it always begins with the relationship that you have with yourself. And I'm going to step away from this question for just a second, Valerie, because the term conscious relationship coach, it's amazing how people always thinks that that's just couples, and it includes couples, but you are always one half of that couple. So I'm always talking about doing the self work first. And then once you build yourself up, into that space of making sure that your self esteem is intact, making sure that you are really clear on who you are and what it is that you want and you're bringing into the relationship. Because what happens many times is when people aren't really clear on who they are and what they want, they go into this relationship and then they become defined by the relationship. And then later on, they're resenting their partner, but it's not your partner's fault because it's our job to make sure that we know, again, who we are and what it is that we want. And being so crystal clear and confident in that space that it truly embodies everything that we do, that we can not only speak to it, but more importantly, we are showing up every single day as who we really are, our authentic selves, loving ourselves, and just really finding comfort in that space. And when you're comfortable in that space, then you can begin to attract your future mate from your space of power and not, well, I just want to be in a relationship. I just want to be in a relationship, because cultivating our joy and our happiness and our peace, that is an inside job. So we want to make sure that we have those things intact prior to being in a relationship. And so that's why having that conscious connection with yourself first is so important.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself.
Thank you.
That, it's a lot of people will have unconscious expectations, which I know you also talk about, that, all right, we're compatible and this feels good and we like the same things and we like to do the same things and we think the same way. And, so therefore, I'm expecting them to want the kind of future that I want. I'm expecting that we've been together for a year, that they want to get married too, that they want to have kids too. We just kind of, or maybe we talk about that briefly in the beginning and we seem to be on the same page, so we don't explore deeper. I just meet so many people in that camp, and therefore they're surprised that they haven't gone deep enough within themselves to really ask the deeper questions to the other person to find out if you're truly aligned in the long term. So I just want to validate that. Absolutely. I think it's a mistake that, unfortunately, a lot of people make, and I used to make. And it's, because like rewind time, let's say pre-World War II, you didn't have to talk about, do you want to get married? That's what everybody wanted. You
Right.
didn't have to really ask, do you want kids? That's what was expected. And, so obviously a lot's changed since then. And
But and even adding to that, Valerie, it's interesting because it's what people did, but we don't necessarily know how many of them actually wanted that.
Mhm.
Did everyone really want to be married? Did they really want to have kids? Did they really want to do so, in their early 20s? Did they want to wait a little bit? So there were a lot of things that happened that we don't really know how many people actually wanted to do it, but we know that's what they did. Right. So
Mhm.
now we're more in a day and age where there's voice and there's choice, and people are talking about their feelings and what matters to them and what's important to them. And now that we have the opportunity to do that, it's interesting because some of the old behavior patterns from the past are still kind of seeping in, though, where it's just kind of like, oh well, we probably will, but it's like, did you have the conversation? Do you really know if they want to be in a relationship? And even if they're talking about, yeah, I want to get married, I want to have kids, do they want to get married and have children with you? Because that
Mhm.
becomes a deeper question. And I've seen this happen before, where there will be a person, because this has happened to men and women alike, where they will get into this relationship and they're making these assumptions because they've heard their, the person they're in their situationship talk about, wanting a family and wanting kids, not recognizing that they're really still waiting for that person because they're not sold on you yet, for whatever reason that is. Or maybe they have no intentions of ever having that type of a relationship with you. So this is
Mhm.
why having those really deep, powerful conversations and not being afraid to have those conversations, because many times that's what happens. People become afraid to really speak the truth and really ask those questions because, ooh, what if they say no? What if this isn't my
Right.
person? And they don't want to deal with that. So they decide to hold off and not ask the question. But the truth always comes out in the end anyway. Or like my mother used to say, the truth always comes out in the wash. So at some point in time, the truth is going to surface. And I just like to encourage people to just step into your truth sooner rather than later.
Right, exactly. Because the longer you stay with someone who doesn't want what you want, the more you're attached, the more
Yes,
invested you become, and therefore the more it hurts when you break up. Even if it hurts initially when you're first with the person, it's going to hurt more later, and that's
absolutely.
the mistake that I've made in the past and that I've seen people make, which is why it's important to have that conscious relationship with ourselves first, because that also includes our own emotional resilience so that we can have the courage to actually ask those tough questions closer to when we meet someone. I mean, obviously not on the first date, but like before you become exclusive, you know. Although, we can talk
Right.
about it because this is what I talk about in my book too. It's like what questions to ask on a first date to tell if the person is actually available for long-term commitment. You don't have to ask that with you. There's like ways to tell that early on. I'm sure we can do a whole interview about that too.
Right.
Um, but I mean, I want to speak to what you just said too, because of course it would hurt a lot if we find out that this person might want marriage and kids, but not with you. But of course, it might be because they want a different parenting style. It might be because they want to date someone of a different religion. It might not be absolutely personal, and they might really love you and care about you, but not see that you have long term potential. And that really hurts. Or they could see that they have long term potential with you, but they could be in a longer timeline than you. Maybe they want to get married in 5 years and you're 35 and you want to have a kid next year, and that doesn't work for you. And you really have to ask those tough questions, which comes
Right.
back to your relationship with yourself. So that's what I want to ask you is um, what does it mean to have a conscious relationship with yourself first? What's important to clarify within yourself to really be able to ask the tough questions if the person wants what you want? And then what skills do you have to have within yourself in order to handle answers that don't feel good to hear?
Oh, okay. So remind me of the skills part because I'm, but developing this relationship with yourself really takes maturity, and it really takes a lot of courage to really go inside, because we really weren't raised, most of us, to ask ourselves, well, how do I feel? And what is it that I really want? And when I talk about joy and saying that I want to be happy and I want to have a good time, well, what does that look like for you? For some people, it's going to a bar and having drinks. For some people, it's going to a book club meeting. For other people, it's going to the gym. So there are all these different things that are important to us. And so we need to be able to go in and clarify for ourselves so that we can say, okay, this is how I define myself as LaShawn. This is how Valerie defines herself as Valerie, and knowing within ourselves what that looks like. And then it's, am I comfortable presenting myself? Because there are a lot of people who say, well, I have this really bubbly personality, but some people don't like that. Well, if you have a really bubbly personality, then you want to shine your light. You want to be who you are and be comfortable with that. So if you're not displaying that version of yourself in front of your friends and your family, then you're going to have a really difficult time doing that with your mate. And anytime when we're suppressing ourselves and who we really are, it's going to build up inside of us. And that resentment at some point in time is going to come out. And so I'm always saying, just be who you are. Just truly be who you are. Fall in love with yourself. And it's really that first step of falling in love with yourself. And then once you get there, and I don't really know that I would call it a skill, Valerie, but I would really say it's just, you know what? This is just truly who I am. And even if you have to write like a personal resume, and this would just be for you to look at and say, okay, this is what I'm good at. This is what I like. These are some things about myself that I would like to improve upon. And just really taking an honest look at yourself, but not from a space of judgment and putting yourself down, but from a place of acceptance. Because if there is a part of you that you want to work on and improve, there's no judgment in that. And that's actually a form of self-love, saying, hey, there's this area of my life where I can be better. I see where I can be more confident within myself. I see where there are areas where I maybe need to improve my ability to really speak my truth in front of people. But that comes from you taking the steps to actually speak your truth, and just doing whatever it takes to step into that space where you do feel that you can freely talk about yourself and feel good about it. Feel proud about who you are and who you have become. So it's doing those things and really developing that part of yourself. Some people like to do meditations, depending on what your spiritual background is. And I always encourage people to tap into that, regardless of whether you're Christian or you're Buddhist or you're Muslim or whatever that is. If your faith is an important part of your life, then you want to make sure that within your particular belief system, system that you are really developing yourself, because that is a very important part of who you are. So again, it's allowing yourself to let your light shine as you are becoming more and more of who you are on a daily basis.
Yeah, no, I love what you're saying because it really speaks to our core values.
Yes.
Like we need to be really living true to our core values. If spirituality is important to us, as you just mentioned, like for example, when I first met my husband, it was really important. And, I did this work before because I had been married and divorced before, and I didn't really clarify what needed to be in place for long-term compatibility. I mean, I, of course, had initial conversations with my ex-husband that, as to what we both wanted, but I didn't go deep enough. And so before I met my current husband, I went really, really deep within myself and what's super important to me, not just what I want, but what do I need in order to feel fulfilled and, not just happy, and what are my core values. And exactly, like it's so important that I was being true to my own spiritual practice and that I could find a man who also had a spiritual practice. It didn't have to be the same one. In fact, we have slightly different spiritual practices. We do slightly different forms of meditation. We prefer slightly different spiritual teachers, but I have deep insights in my meditation practice. He has deep insights in his, and we talk about it. And I just knew I couldn't be happy with somebody unless I felt seen. Not like it's not about bragging about our spiritual attainments, right? As we know. But at the same time, it's like if I'm having uncovering this deep part of myself that feels really vulnerable, I need to know that the person that I'm with can hear it and accept it and ask deeper questions about it, not just be like, that's nice. What's for dinner?
And I love that, Valerie, that the two of you knew that it was important enough for both of you to say, okay, here's a difference between us. Like we're not exactly on the same page there. However, we can talk about it. And if you can talk about it, that means that you're communicating. That means that you're seeing and hearing one another, which was very important for you. And it's important in every relationship for each person to feel seen and to feel heard and valued. So when you come together in that way, that's what brings the alignment, because you're not going to agree on every single topic 100% of the time. Like that just that's an unrealistic expectation for any couple to have. But when you find those areas, and I always tell couples, it's not just about the compatibility, right? Because everybody's always focused on the compatibility. But typically, where there's going to be an issue is your areas of incompatibility. So, how do you handle those areas? And if you can come to a healthy compromise earlier on in the relationship, then that's going to be the building blocks of your relationship. And that's really setting a really strong, sturdy foundation, because okay, we can have these differences of opinions or a different stance on something that's important to us, but we can still talk about it in a way where both of us feel seen, heard, and respected. And that's extremely important in a relationship, that both parties feel that, yes, I can express my opinion and I don't feel as if I'm being spoken down to or that I'm being dismissed, but I am being heard, and they simply have a different perspective. And that makes for a very healthy relationship.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's why I think it's important to talk about these topics relatively early on to make sure that the person is going to have an attitude of acceptance. And, oh, thanks for sharing your perspective. I have a different one and yours is valid too. It's like that's the culture that it takes to build compatibility over time, right? Because people change, but these attitudes are important to stay the same, like open-mindedness and acceptance of each other's differences, etc. Right?
Yes, yes. And even what you said about people changing, as we change over time, if we've already established this foundation where we believe that we can talk to our partner, feel seen, feel heard, express our opinions, when we do begin to feel a shift within ourselves, then it's just another conversation, but it's not the needing to hide or, "Ooh, I'm not sure what's going to happen." So we don't have to move in fear, but we can move forward in confidence and actually talk to our partner and say, "Hey, this is what's happening within me. This is what I'm thinking and feeling happening now. And then that allows you to grow together as compared to growing apart. So conversations are extremely important because, as you stated, Valerie, yeah, we do change through time. And as that's happening, it doesn't mean that there has to be separation. You can actually grow closer together if you keep the lines of communication open.
Exactly. And yeah, and so what are all the topics that you think are important to address early on to make sure that, you're truly aligned?
All the topics, wow, there are plenty. But I would say some key ones would definitely be finances. It would definitely be children. It would be the handling of social media because that's become a very
Mm,
important thing in life today. There would be the topics of your social lives and friends and family, setting boundaries, those type of conversations, and the conversation of having conversations because it's very important that you are having the conversation with yourself to know what's important to you. Because there could be a topic that is extremely important to one couple, but it totally doesn't even matter to another couple. And this is why, again, doing that self work in the beginning and having that conscious relationship with yourself is so important so that you are bringing up the topics that are important to you and your partner is doing the same thing. And then as you're doing that, again, it sets the tone for having a healthy relationship if you choose to continue in having the relationship, but at least you know where you stand. You get to be crystal clear from that space.
exactly. Yeah. And I know that there's an art to this, right? Obviously, you want to balance getting to know the person in a fun way versus asking questions about these topics. So, yeah, like how do you recommend people find that balance?
Oh, great question. Well, one of the ways, and this is what I tell people, the first thing when it comes to dating, right, is to relax, have fun, and just gather information. So this isn't the asking 10,000 questions, but it's just being in the person's presence. How do you feel? Are you laughing? Does it feel natural for both of you? Is there this even kind of like ebb and flow? Are you able to hold hands? Do you want to hold hands? Like it's really this beautiful, and I love the way you say this, the art of it, because it really should kind of mesh and there really should be a bit of a flow to it and knowing what feels organic to you, what feels natural. Does it feel forced? Does it feel fake? And so you're really gauging yourself the first couple of dates just to see what am I thinking and what am I feeling? And then I always encourage people to date from the bottom up instead of the top down. And
Mm,
what I mean by that, and this is something that's more geared towards women or possibly men who really, really, really want to be in a relationship right now, right? So what happens is people will go out on a date and they're like, well, they were attractive and they said this and they said that and they were funny. And now all of a sudden they're running 1,000 miles per hour, find a priest or a judge and let's get married. And it's just like, well, put the
yeah.
brakes on. It's just like we're not there yet. Let's learn. Let's keep talking. Let's keep going. Now, I know there are the exceptions where there are people and they meet and 6 months later they get married or 6 weeks later or something like that. And then many years later they still have this marriage. That does happen, but that's a very small percentage of the population. So just allow your relationship to be your relationship without rushing it. And just allow yourselves to grow. So when people are dating from that perspective, then you can go out and have fun and you can learn more about the person and keeping in mind that what's happening in the first couple of weeks, well, that's when everybody is still within their creative mind. So you're flirting and it's so cute and I like this and we both like that and you're all excited and that's great. But what you're looking for is longevity. So you want to, just kind of pace yourself and say, okay, because again, you're gathering this information. And as you are, it's just like, okay, I like this, I like this, I like that. But then you also want to find the things that you dislike. And so allow them to continue to show you because they're going to show you who they are. And as they are, that's going to take some time. So give it a couple of months. See where you are 3 months down the line, 6 months down the line. And as you're building this relationship, maybe you feel that it's not worth it and you don't want it to last that long. Then you can cut it off sooner. But again, this whole dating phase and having fun and asking questions, there really just needs to be an ebb and flow. So allow yourselves to have some fun and then ask some questions. But if you're just there like a drill sergeant, and I remember years ago being on a date like that, I was like, well, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? And it was just like, is this an interrogation?
Right. All right, this is a
Because it's
job interview.
right. Yeah, it's like, am I getting paid for this? But it can begin to feel like that
Right.
if it's too much too soon. And so again, you want to be in a relationship, okay, but also remind yourself that you want to be in the relationship with the right person that's going to last. So be okay with letting go of someone today for the person that you may meet tomorrow. Be
Yeah.
okay with that. Be okay with releasing that which doesn't work for you. And so that's what I mean by dating from the bottom up. Allow them to, okay, 5 points there, 10 points there. Okay, they're doing good. We're moving up the ladder. But if you start them off on the top of a pedestal and you
Right.
don't even really know the person, there are going to be a lot of hurts and disappointments and things like that that occur because you're giving them credit for something that they haven't really earned yet. So just allow
Mhm.
it to have some type of ebb and flow.
Yeah, no, I love that description of the bottom up, meaning, like don't make any assumptions, but ask really poignant questions. And I love the sort of flow that you just presented, which is have fun first, just see if it feels good to be around them first. And then once it does, then there's room for another question,
Yeah,
so
yeah. And you can ask
kind of,
questions throughout, right? And again, that's why there's the ebb and flow as compared to the interview, the Q&A. It's just kind
mhm.
of a flow. Yeah, you're going to ask some questions, but have fun with it.
Yeah,
As you're learning their favorite color, their favorite holiday, what they may not like about Christmas, you don't like the beach, really? Why not? And you're having all these different conversations, but allow it to be just that again with the ebb and flow, not just kind of like a checklist. And
right.
even if you have a checklist, right? And most people do, even if you have a checklist, you'll know and you'll feel inside like, oh, check. Okay. Store it as information though. Just store
Right.
it and just keep going.
Yeah, 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 no, exactly. And I find, at least for me, and I don't know if you found that this is useful for you, but when I tell people to ask those questions, and also for me, when I was dating, it really made it so much less of an interrogation when I answered the question myself first, meaning like instead of saying, hey, do you have a spiritual practice? Like that sounds a little bit of an interrogation versus like one of the most important things for me in my life is having a spiritual practice. And if I don't meditate in the morning, then I don't feel centered to go through my day. And when I do, then I'm just so much more intuitive. And that's just so important to me. What about you? Do you have a spiritual practice? So it's like that makes it so much more of a conversation rather than an interrogation and like allows for that flow. I mean, what do you think about that?
I think that's a possibility, for a way for people to ask questions. It definitely allows the person to share who they are first and then allow the other person to kind of chime in and give their perspective and how they're feeling and, where they stand in regards to that particular topic. And, again, I also think that it's going with the flow. Because
Mm-hmm.
I do think that one of the things that's happening in this day and age is that people are getting so bogged down into it has to look like this and it has to look like that and this term and use this and use that. But that begins to pull away from the flow. Because
Mm-hmm.
again, when you're with your person, you want to be able to relax and laugh and talk and share. And then when it comes time for the more detailed conversations, you'll be able to hear it, and you'll be able to share. And it may come out some similar to the way that Valerie was giving us that example. And then it may not. But the most important thing is that you feel comfortable stating it
Mhm.
however it comes out. And that's the key. That's the space. That's kind of the sweet spot where you want to just feel like I could talk to this person all day. Now you might not, right?
Right.
But you want to be able to feel as if, yeah, I want to do more than send a text message. I want to be in this person's presence. I really like it when we hang out, and whether it's we go to the movies, we go to an art show, or whatever it is that you like to do. But when you're just feeling compelled over and over again to be in that person's presence, and then as you're walking around, you're talking. And as you talk naturally, questions are going to come up. And as those questions do, you're answering them, they're answering them. And then there will be a time where there is more of us just having this conversation. Hey, I like where this is going. Do you feel the same way? Yes. Okay. Now, and you just ask more questions. But the key is, and I said this earlier as well, is about knowing what it is that you want and knowing what's important to you so that you're knowing what questions to ask. And that's
Mhm.
very important.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And what I'm hearing and what you said, that's the most important component in all of this is, well, first of all, for us to do the inner work so that we're confident that we can speak our truth. And
Yes.
then, second of all, that the primary thing to look for in a relationship that's truly right for us is that it's a culture where both people can express their truth
Yes.
and that you feel permission to do so. And you are, when they share their truth, it feels aligned with yours at least enough to keep moving forward. And um so I guess the question is then, what happens if you're asking these questions and it's important to you and you're becoming attached to someone and then they say something that isn't aligned with what you want? How do you then
Ooh.
handle that?
Well, and it depends on how important the topic is to you. Like, is it a 10 out of 10? Like, is it that important? Is it a 5? Is it a 6? And it's all about continuously having conversations. So if it's not an alignment, is it a deal breaker? Because if it's a deal breaker, then you already know what you have to do. But everything isn't a deal breaker. And this is why I am a big advocate of having really important conversations even before people get engaged, simply because the more information you have, when you find things that you have a disagreement on, you have the opportunity to work through it. Because okay, we're not in agreement with it. Well, can you find some middle ground? And if you can, then that's a great thing. Because again, as I said earlier, many times it's knowing how you're going to handle your areas of incompatibility. And that would present itself as one of them. So once these areas do present themselves, it's just about having the conversation and then making decisions from there. And where the conversation is going to go, I can't tell you that. Only you and your partner, after you have that conversation, that's when you're going to know. And so if you can work it out, then work it out. Because what I find is that many times things can be worked out, but you have to get to it soon enough so that both partners are willing to really work through the issue if it's there.
Yeah, no, I agree. And what does it really mean for conflict to create this opening for deeper intimacy? And, like how would you demonstrate that early on? Because I agree that if you have these conversations and the person says, like, let's say they, you want to live in one place or one lifestyle, they want to live in a different place or a different lifestyle, and you might be incompatible. But what does it really mean? That's just one example, but you could come up with a
Mhm.
different example. What does it really mean to come up with this kind of win-win compromise that works for both people so that you can, oh, wow, we can do that and we can use that as a template going forward. And then that brings us closer together.
Well, it looks like, and let's go ahead and use the example that you provided with, let's say that they have different lifestyles. Well, then it becomes a question of, tell me why that's important to you. And what does that lifestyle look like for you? Tell me more. Tell me more. So it's always asking questions, not just yes, no, but tell me what that means to you. Tell me why that's important. Because if you can get to the person's why, many times you go, oh, okay, I see that. I hadn't thought about that before. Because we're all looking through our own particular lens. And it's not a lens that's right or wrong. They're just different. And that's one of the words that I love to use. You're looking through different lenses. And so once you have that conversation and you're asking each other their whys, you may find that there's a compromise that you would have never thought about before because you didn't know why it was important to them. And so maybe there is a possibility that you can come together and you can blend those lifestyles a lot better than you originally thought. You know, if there's one person that, let's say, they're more social and they want to be out on the weekends. And it's just like, well, does it have to be every single weekend or can we choose 2 weekends out of the month? And, or maybe it's one weekend, but we're really gone every, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and we jam pack that weekend. There's compromises that can be made when each person knows, again, the why it is important to this person that I care about, why my stance is important to me, and is there any leeway? Is there a way that we can possibly blend this so that both of us are happy? And if you can come to that agreement, then that's when that original conflict can become an area where the two of you are now closer together. And if couples can start off this way and they see, wow, well, we handled that situation that way in the past. What else can we do this with? And so it's getting in that mindset of how are we going to resolve our conflicts early on? Because the better you become at doing this, the easier it's going to be to have difficult conversations in the future.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that it's so true that if you can have this kind of conversation with a smaller topic in the beginning and it goes well, then you've
Yeah.
determined that they have the ability to listen to your point of view, to validate it if it's different, to ask deeper questions of you, and of course, vice versa, that they're open minded, that they're willing to, really get tuned to what's important to you, that they're not just going to say my way or the highway, right? I mean, these are really
Mhm.
important things to clarify in terms of the culture that we want to build. And so, yeah, that's the question. It sounds like compassion and empathy and open-mindedness are just like really important qualities. So, what kinds of qualities are we looking for in these conversations to have them go well?
Oh, well, you just actually mentioned some of them. Having the compassion, having compassion for your partner, allowing yourself to step into a space where you try to be as empathetic as you possibly can be, because that goes along with the compassion, and allowing yourselves room to grow. And that's why it's so important to ask more questions, asking questions as you're getting closer and closer to one another, because it really helps build the relationship. So I always tell people, one of the characteristics that you want to have within yourself is that be a person that's looking for a win-win, not to
Mm-hmm.
be right, but to be happy, seeking a win-win, and recognizing that if you want to be in a relationship, that's being on a team. That's a team. If you want to be in a land by yourself, that's what, golfers do when people play tennis, right? Like those are individual sports. But if you're going to play football, if you're going to play soccer, basketball, if you're going to be on a team, then you need to have more of a team mentality. And so being in a
Mm-hmm.
relationship is team mentality, not me mentality. Now, yes, you are a part of it. And yes, you need to continue to do your self work and work on yourself and make sure that the relationship is in alignment with who you are. But that's you taking care of yourself as a part of the team. Each
Mm-hmm.
team member, right? When you look at a football game, and I'm using football because I love football, but when you're watching a good football game, the coaches are doing what they're supposed to be doing, which is why sometimes you need a life coach. I'm just throwing
Yes.
that out there. Or a conscious relationship coach. This is why you need them sometimes. And then each individual player, if they're really on top of their game, they're eating the way they need to eat. They are working out when they need to work out. They're showing up for practices. They are being involved with the team. They're caring about the other team members because they recognize that if we want to win together as a team, we need to work together. So yes, I care about myself, but I also care about my teammates because we work together. We win together. And when people take that attitude into their relationships, that we are in this together, it makes it, oh my gosh, it makes a world of difference. And so that's the type of characteristics. Those are the things that you want to develop in yourself if you're saying that I want to have this happy, healthy relationship.
Yeah. And the things that you want to look for in the conversations that you're having,
Yes.
feel like we're on the same team? Or does it seem like the person wants to make unilateral decisions, and isn't really considering me or, vice versa? And then how can I ask questions about like, do you value collaboration and let's create a win-win and,
Yes.
really looking out for that. I love how you said that. And I know you also talk about, because we're talking about asking questions and the following the flow, which I agree with. And how do you really tell the difference between an answer that means that you're compatible versus an answer that means you're truly aligned in the long term, right? Like what kinds of things should we really be looking out for if we are looking for sustainability and we're really looking for that soul level partnership that's gonna go the distance?
I love that question. And I would say that, the compatibility, is good, right? Like you can say we both love to dance, we both love football, we're both foodies, and those things are great. But it's really everything that we've already spoken about. It's about feeling the connection and really paying attention to how you are feeling on the inside. If you share something that's extremely important to you, do you feel that you can rest in your partner's arms? Do you feel safe? And do you feel like I'm gonna be okay? Like when something goes wrong, do you feel like, oh, I need to go and talk to my partner, and I know that they can help me, and I'm just gonna feel better as a result of being in their presence and talking to them. Do they feel like a foundation? Does it feel stable to you? And really paying attention to that. Because if you're not feeling those things and you're feeling guarded, you're feeling as if you need to protect yourself, you're feeling unsure, you feel yourself kind of closing off and kind of like putting up a wall instead of opening your arms, those are some key indicators that you may not be in alignment, even if you have a lot of areas where you're compatible. And this is
Mhm.
why it's important for people to pay closer attention because you can find people, even your friends. Your friends are your friends because you have these areas where you're compatible, right? But maybe if your friend is of the gender that you would date, right? Maybe they're your friend, but they would never be a partner of yours because there's some other stuff like, oh no, like we wouldn't work in that type of a relationship. We couldn't work in a romantic relationship. We work well as friends, but that's it. And many
Mhm.
times as people are dating, that's simply who that person is. It's just a person that's in your life as a friend, but you really don't have what it takes to go the distance. And so it really takes time and knowing yourself and really again examining how do you feel when you're with this person. And if it's not lining up, and of course everything isn't going to be all, butterflies and flowers and roses. I'm not saying that, but I'm talking about when it comes to the more important things in life. How are you feeling? And if it's safe and secure and you feel seen and you feel heard, then you're doing pretty good. And it's probably a good idea for you to go forward because that's a sign of alignment. But if not,
Mhm.
then you're going to want to ask some more questions, and prepare yourself because that may not be your person and be okay with that.
Right. And like we said, trust that if you determine that earlier rather than later before you get attached, that's when, you might not want to rock the boat because you really are having a lot of fun with this person. But it's important
Yes.
to clarify that sooner rather than later because it's actually going to hurt less when you
Hmm.
find that out sooner than if you stay and you find that out later. And that goes all the way back to our relationship with ourselves, that we have the skills to be able to handle that and to really be. I always tell when I work with women that we need to be more committed to the culture that we want to co-create, and to visualize that, and
Hmm.
to trust that we can attract somebody who wants to co-create that culture too, of empathy and compassion and secure attachment, meaning that
Hmm.
we're safe havens and secure base for each other, and like
Right.
really thriving together, and we can create those win-win agreements. And I'm more connected to that feeling that we're on the same
Hmm.
team. I'm really committed to being with somebody rather than to be committed to this person that I met who doesn't want that. And it takes a lot of courage and a lot of alignment with ourself and self-knowledge, as you said, in
Yes.
order to be able to be more committed to the culture that we're creating, that we're truly aligned, knowing that if we say no to something that might feel good in the moment but isn't what we want in the long term, of course that's going to hurt, and we're going to have the skills of, you know being managing the sadness and managing the fear when we do end it in the beginning with someone who's not aligned, and trust that then that opens the door, like you said, to
Right.
someone who is truly aligned. And it's a difficult process. I know that when I coach women, a lot of times it does really benefit from having some support, with somebody who can validate the choice that you're making and can lead you through this process. And I imagine that you do that with your clients too. So do you want to tell, people how they can get in touch with you and the kinds of work that you do with people when they come to you? Like, let's say someone's dating and they're not sure if they're aligned with the person. Like, how can you really help them figure that out?
Yes. Well, I serve as, again, a conscious relationship coach, and I coach individuals because, again, most important relationship you have is the one with yourself, first and foremost. So if you're interested, and it's not just about dating, let me say that it could just simply be you want to feel more grounded in yourself. Maybe you're not in a relationship yet, but you want to help, or you feel that you need help developing your confidence, your self-esteem, really developing the courage to speak your truth and, work through any blocks that you have that may be blocking you from doing so. So that's the type of work that I, of course, do for individuals. And then if you happen to be in a relationship, but you just want the coaching for yourself, of course, I provide that as well. And then for couples, it's really about helping you learn to communicate and see your way, um, not necessarily back to one another, but really just being able to see yourself and create bridges and allow yourselves that space to open yourselves up and saying, hey, I think that we need some help communicating. Maybe there were some conversations that you didn't really discuss enough earlier on, and now you're struggling with those issues. And so just really helping people navigate their way into becoming better communicators, allowing themselves to grow and truly, speak their truth. And I talk about truth a lot because it's the foundation for everything. If you truly want a healthy relationship, each person has to be willing to speak from their truth. If you are not doing that, you are hurting yourself. You're most certainly hurting your relationship. And it's just really doing a disservice to everything. And so I'm always encouraging people, find your truth and step into that space and allow whatever it is to flow. And so these are the type of things that I'm constantly working with people on and just really helping them, again, just make themselves be the best versions of themselves that they can be consciously for themselves first, and then, of course, for their relationship.
Yeah, that's just beautifully said. And I
Thank
know
you.
that, you've also written a couple books on these topics. So,
I have.
do you want to talk about your books as well?
I will, yes. So this one, and I hope you guys can see this. Oh. I think I messed that up, but this is I Am Not an Option, a woman's guide to self-love and relationships. And in this book, it is all about asking yourself the question. Now, what's great about it, even though when I originally wrote the book, I wrote it for women, there have been men of different age ranges that have told me that this is not a book for women. It is just a book for people, and it's a great
Mm.
relationship book. And I remember there was a gentleman that I was talking to that was in his approximately like late 60s. And I remember him telling me, LaShawn, if I had read that book many years ago, I believe that my first marriage would have worked. And
Wow.
it was just like, whoa.
Mm.
And it was for him, it was because of the questions that were asked that he just never thought to ask himself before. And he recognized that if he knew himself that well, that he would have been able to show up in his relationship differently. So it would have just made all the difference in the world for him. And so I really look at it as a guide where people can, again, just learn more about themselves. Each chapter has what I call a set of reflection questions, questions that they can go through and really reflect on who they are and how they've been showing up in past relationships and what they want for their future relationships. So there's just all of these really good questions that really allow you to take a deep dive within. And once you do, then you prepare yourself to say, you know what? I am not an option. My voice is not an option. My body is not an option. My thoughts, my feelings, they are not an option. And really stepping confidently into that space so that you can go forward and create the conscious relationship that you're looking for.
I
So that's
love that.
that one. Thank you. And then the other one, the most recent one is trying to hide this. Before
Yes.
we go,
I
before we
know
go any further,
the
yes,
virtual
it's
background.
messing up.
I have one too, but
But
I'll put the link, of
put the
course,
link up for
below
me.
the video if you're
Right.
watching this on YouTube, and in the show notes if you're listening on the podcast. So, yeah.
Yes, but this one is before we go any further, and it is a pre-engagement workbook for couples. And this book is designed to help couples, and it is a true workbook where there are questions for each partner to ask themselves, and then they come together and they share those answers with their partner. And always, and I'm encouraging them, what else? As you were going through this workbook on this particular chapter, I, of course, couldn't include every possible question in the world. So if there's another question that comes to your mind, I want you to write that question down, answer it yourself, and then share that question with your partner and get their response to that question as well. And this is important because as you're deciding to plan your life together, right? And you're deciding whether or not do we want to take it any further? Do we want to move in together? Do we want to get engaged? It's asking these types of questions so that you can get a clear understanding again of who you are and what you want, because it's going to re-clarify who you are. And then you get to really ask those questions and have that conversation that you may not have even thought to ask that question. Let me give you an example of this. Let's say, for example, you decide that, okay, we want to have kids. And you say, okay, you want kids, I want kids. How many? Two kids, maybe three. Okay, fine. And then you walk away. But there's a lot to rearing children.
Right.
So are both of you okay with getting up at 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning to feed the child? Who's going to be changing diapers? When the child gets sick, who's calling off work? What does that look like? And so it's having those deeper conversations, because what will
Mhm.
happen is people will assume, because you said, yes, you want to have a child and I want to have a child, and we've agreed that we're going to raise this family together. But are you on the same page with what that looks like? And
Mhm.
many couples aren't,
Right.
with children, with finances, with friends, with social lives, all of these things. They didn't ask enough questions. There were assumptions made because they were on the same page, right? They were compatible with a little piece of it, but there was a much larger piece that they didn't investigate. So before we
Exactly.
go any further, yes, was written to help you investigate those areas more so that okay, we're not on the same page with this. We're not on the same page with that. And so as you're going through the 17 different topics throughout the course of the book, you're like, wow, okay, we're getting a clearer picture. And once you do, it doesn't necessarily mean mean that it's a deal breaker, but you may need to go and get some type of coaching or relationship counseling before you go any further.
Right.
So, and I encourage that in the book. If at some point in time you're realizing, wow, we really love each other, we thought that we were on a better, in a better position than we realize we actually are, that doesn't mean that it's over. It just means that you need to do some work. So do the work so that when you get engaged, you're feeling more relaxed and confident, and you're knowing and not assuming or hoping that certain things are going to happen.
Right, exactly. And
Yes.
those just sound like wonderful books. So, I mean, I plan to read them myself actually, because
Thank you.
there's so many wonderful questions that you mentioned in there. And I too work with a lot of pre-committed couples and women to help them determine if the relationship they're in is the one that they want to spend the rest of their lives with. And I completely agree. I mean, I wrote a book myself that helps women clarify this. And of course, I'm always wanting to learn what other information people have to share, what questions I might have missed in my own work. So I really appreciate that. And I know you mentioned that if people read your books and they have questions, or they ask one of these questions and they get kind of a, that's a gray area, I don't know if we're compatible in the long term, that they can reach out to you for coaching. So how can
Yes.
people find, what's the best way for people to reach out to you if they're interested in working with you?
The best way for you to reach out to me is through my website. So you can either go to beforewegoanyfurther.com, and you can schedule sessions with me there, or you can go to my website, which is LaShawnMcQuarrie.com. And I do free consultations, by the way. So you can fill out the information form sheets, whatever these things are called. You can fill those out, and yeah, you can contact me that way.
Yeah. And of course, I will put the links to those below the video on YouTube and in the show notes if you're listening to the podcast, because I think that with the world the way it is these days, and everyone's lives are so complicated and busy, and there's all these apps where people can meet, countless
Yeah,
people and talk to them. It's just so easy to get lost in the weeds.
it is.
And, it's so easy to follow chemistry and get attached to someone and not know whether they're really right for you in the long term, and just sort of go with the flow and then get attached, and then something doesn't feel right, but I don't know how to clarify what it is, and I don't want to rock the boat, right? So many
Hmm.
people that I meet are in that kind of situation, and we really want to cut through that. We really want to help clarify people's truth and empower them to speak their truth and empower them to make the right choices, because let's face it, who you spend the rest of your life with is one of the most important decisions that we're ever going to make.
Yes.
And, even though a lot of people that we know have gotten married and divorced and still come out the other side okay, we don't want that. We really
No.
don't want
No.
people to go through that pain. Nobody wants to go through that pain. And
Correct.
especially if you've been there in the past, you want to make sure that you're choosing the right person this time, because life is short at the end of the day. And we really want to
Yes.
be supported in thriving and really living our purpose and really leaving the legacy that we want to leave in the world. And a lot of times, I do believe that there's certain people who can support us in living our purpose, so that we can create more together than we could on our own. And,
Yes.
that's the potential of conscious partnership, that we're really on the same team,
Yes.
like creating big things in the world and being a power couple. And,
Yes.
that's the vision that I want to leave people with as well, that we can, truly thrive together in love. And that's what soul shaking love means to me. Um,
Yes. And I love that title, by the way. I was just like, oh, I love that soul shaking love. I love that. And what does that mean to you, Valerie?
yeah, yeah. For me, it's, that concept of the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. That when we really have this true alignment, which is why I love that you also talk about the word alignment. And the way I define that is both mind, body, and spirit, right? That, like, meaning like our vision, our values, our And values are something that's really deeply felt, what gets you out of bed in the morning.
Yes.
And that the body piece, of course, is that we're compatible sexually, but also that we're compatible in terms of what makes us feel safe. And
Mm.
secure attachment really is like you feel that in your body, where like this person is your rock and you're their rock, right? And so that's
Yes.
the body piece too. And then the soul piece is values and vision and what makes you really deeply alive, feel like you're alive, even if spirituality is important to me, but it doesn't have to be literal soul alignment, but like what makes your soul come alive. And when you really feel like all those pieces are in place, it's like, for me, it feels like there's this aliveness, this vibrance, right? This like sort of like vibration that happens. And for me, like I'd heard the term soul shaking before, but when I met my husband and we were really compatible, it felt like soul shaking,
I love
down to the
that.
core kind of. And so I was like, okay, that's, a beautiful name to be coming from. I'm not sure who originally coined the term. But
Okay.
I checked to see if it was trademarked before I chose the title.
Great job. Well, it's beautiful, and I absolutely love that in your description of it. So we're in alignment with that too, as well, Valerie. I love that
Yeah, no,
as
I knew that when I had you on the show, and so that's why I chose to interview you too, because I think we don't have enough. I mean, there can't be too many people teaching about this, especially as the world is unfortunately becoming more polarized, and it's important to find the people that
yes,
we're truly aligned with, so that we can, like I said, thrive.
absolutely, absolutely. Well,
So
this is beautiful. Thank you for having me today.
yeah, likewise. And thank you for sharing your wisdom. And I think this is a wonderful way, obviously, like I said, the podcast will be available forever, but it's a lovely way as we're releasing it into the new year to start the new year on the right foot. If you're single or if you're in a relationship, even if you are in a marriage, I think having these discussions about what you want next in your lives and
Mhm.
in the future is also a really great way. I mean, I know that's one of the things I do with my husband every year is we talk about what do we want to create in 2026.
Nice,
Yeah.
beautiful. Well,
Um,
and I want to throw something else in before we close. The going through this book, and it's interesting because it's funny how people end up multi-purposing my books, and I love it. There's a woman that I know, and what she said to me was, well, I already ordered your book. And she said, and what I'm going to do, even though I'm single, I want to go through it now to see how well I know myself. And
right.
then when I meet someone, I want to go through it again with them, see if anything has changed within me. And I said, "Oh my gosh, that is really a wonderful idea." And so within that, even if you're already engaged or you're already married, you can still use this book because there's a possibility that, again, there are just questions that you need more clarity on. So it's going to help you do that regardless of the phase of your relationship. Again, even though it was created before you go any further and get engaged. But if you already are, that's okay.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's just deepening this connection with yourself and with your partner. And,
Yes.
because everybody, that's what having a growth mindset means, that we're always learning and growing and thriving and
Yep.
co-creating. So I love that. So whatever stage of your life or your relationship that you're in, you could always benefit, especially from the I'm Not an Option book, to help really connect deeper with yourself. And you can look at that as a law of attraction practice too, that the more you're
Yes.
clear about who you are and what you want, and you're going out and meeting people, you're more likely to attract uh, somebody that is aligned with you, since that's what you're focused on.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's another topic that we could do another show on, the law of attraction in and of itself, and how our energy attracts the people that we want. So, which is why it's very important that we always speak in the affirmative to what we want instead of what
Mm-hmm.
we don't want. Because if you're always focused on what you don't want, that's what's going to show up in
Yep.
your life.
Yeah,
So,
unfortunately.
yep, yep.
It's like,
It's just like it works both ways.
yeah. I know, and especially when you're already in a relationship. I mean, we could do another interview on that topic, but
Yes.
I think it's even more important when you're in a relationship. People just look at it for attracting a relationship, but I coach a lot of couples where they complain about each other, and I'm like, the law of attraction works really wonderful in a relationship. The more you complain about that, guess what you're going to see more of, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, of course, that's a whole nother topic about communication. I'm
Yeah.
sure that we can have a number of interviews.
Absolutely.
Because I know we didn't quite clarify that topic of skills, but, the skill that we did talk about is how to really ask yourself the deeper questions and have open-mindedness and have deep listening and empathy and curiosity and compassion. And,
Yes.
those skills are so important to have, whether you're meeting somebody, whether you're clarifying if you're compatible, whether you're married and you're in a disagreement, so that's the baseline. And then, of course, there are so many more skills to be had. And I'm sure you also talk about that in your book. So,
Mhm.
although it's probably time to end today, we could keep going for hours, I'm sure.
I
And that's
know.
also how we know we're aligned with someone, right? So,
Absolutely.
I wish that everybody has a day that's filled with true alignment to themselves and true conscious partnerships with the people in their life, so that we can all, at the end of the day, really feel like we're fulfilled by our relationships and thriving together. So, thank you so much, LaShawn. And
Thank you.
until next time.